Welcome to the Taonga Files, the podcast that reconnects whakapapa, mātauranga, and the journeys of Taonga Māori. Ko migoto iria ahau.
Ko Amber Aranui tēnei, through research, Taonga speak, revealing where they've travelled, who they've touched, and what they carry.
So let's step beyond the register as we uncover stories that shape who we are.
These stories were never lost. They were just waiting to be found.
Kia ora koutou. This is going to be our first brief. We're going to have short episodes that go into depth on a specific type of technique of research or sometimes a word. And this time we're going to talk about a word. And we're going to talk about what Taonga is, because a lot of people are not going to be familiar with that word and with other terms used in Te Reo Māori. We're going to have a glossary available for each episode for words that might not be familiar to people, especially people outside of Aotearoa. But we thought we should go into depth on this particular word since it's in the title of the podcast. This episode will give you, the listener, a way to become more acquainted with what we're going to use Taonga to mean, because it can mean many things. I'm going to pass over to our resident Te Reo Māori expert, Migoto, to give us the definition of Taonga, and then we'll have a little conversation about what Taonga means to us in this podcast and go from there.
Cool. So I think, if anyone wanted to look up a kupu in definition, all of this information is available to us, to anybody. And but I think the whole point of us doing this is to make sure that we place this definition in the right context of this podcast. So, but we're going to sort of cast the net a little bit wide. I've pulled up the definition from out of Te Aka Dictionary, and again, Te Aka Dictionary is online as well. So, the definition for Taonga is a noun, of course. The property, goods, possessions, affects, object, and then it has some synonyms underneath. Actually, Taonga is mentioned in Ko Te Tuarua, the Article 2 of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and it goes a little bit something like this: Ko te kuini o ingarangi, ka wakarite, ka wakai, ki ngā rangatira ki ngā hapu, ki ngā tangata katoa o nutirani, te tino rangatiratanga o rātou wenua, o rātou kāinga, me o rātou taonga katoa. Now, as a reo speaker, when I see Taonga in that context, my perspective is that Taonga is all of your possessions. I think if you're one of those people that thinks actually, the context of the Tiriti o Waitangi and also the English translations of the Treaty of Waitangi, the word Taonga is quite a lot actually obscured in terms of possessions and what actually it means. And I think we've spent all this time trying to figure out what that means to us. Something else I also found on NZ History website is, as submissions to the Waitangi Tribunal concerning the Māori language have made clear, Taonga refers to all dimensions of a tribal group's estate, material and non-material heirlooms, Wāhi tapu, ancestral lore, and Whakapapa. That's a little bit more of information than what we just read, I guess, in the definition from the Te Aka Dictionary. I'm just going to hand over to Amber. What's your whakamārama of the kupu Taonga that you've come to working in whare Taonga? Share with us your whakaaro e hoa.
Yeah, I agree with you and the Whakaaro that you've talked about in terms of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and what the Waitangi Tribunal have identified Taonga as being. And I think in the context of museums, Taonga, for the most part, refers to a physical object, something that is of Māori origin or has been used by Māori, made by Māori, although, that's just one part of what a Taonga is. And we know that within the museum space, Taonga can also refer to things like mātauranga or traditional knowledge, pūrākau or the stories that we have that have been handed down over generations, but also things like photographs, drawing, and even archival text can in some instances be seen as taonga. And I think also, and I think I'd like to hear from you about this in particular, given your love of te reo Māori, that, taonga are tangible and intangible. They can be physical things that we can see and touch, but also they are things that are invisible to the eye. And actually, te reo Māori is an example of that.
We have a kupu in the reo called kurahuna, so it's there's a hidden meaning, and it's only understood by those who know it and feel it and believe it. But I guess the reo is a really good example of that. We say he taonga tuku iho, a taonga that's been handed down through generations, and it's something that it's a really, I guess, substantial part of who we are as the reo. And so to express our Māoritanga or to be Māori, the reo is part of it, not to say that it's all of it or that it's a main part of it, because everybody has their own journey of their Taha Māori. The reo, I guess, coming from a dual heritage, the reo of your own culture is quite daunting if you weren't raised. I was raised in Te Ao Māori, bless my mother, raising me in that way, and coming to really appreciate my limited ability in Japanese, and then being in the context, in the country, with no one who speaks reo Pākehā is just insane, and it's really difficult. But also, you miss out on a lot of the context. But taonga is a versatile word. I think I've noticed in the last perhaps 15 years that the word taonga has also come to mean prized possessions or treasures that aren't just Māori. And so I wanted to ask you about that, e whai, what's your whakaaro on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. For me, I think what people consider taonga is personal. And you're right, there are things that I consider in my personal life taonga, but they are not of Māori origin, but they are something special and important and, close to the heart. The idea of people being taonga,
right,
I think is quite interesting.
Sure.
We hear that whakaaro quite a lot. We can discuss maybe in a later episode looking at hoiwi tangata and taonga and whether they are taonga or not. In the Taonga Tūturu Act, tupuna or ancestry remains are not identified as being taonga.
Right.
So that's definitely something that I would love to kind of talk about more to try and get to the root of that, because we see a living person as a taonga, but then on the other hand, there's those who have passed on, and whether or not we see them as a taonga or not.
We're going beyond the physical object per se, and not to, the word object in itself too, in the museum context, can be quite, I guess, demeaning in terms of Māori artefacts or taonga Māori. People are taonga because what would we do without the people, right? So, I'm hoping that, this Kōrero can share some inspiration with our listeners to really understand there's actually a lot of depth to the word taonga, not to undermine all of its definitions, because all of them, actually, it's quite inclusive. I really can't think of a lot of things that it's not, because it's determined by the person who's owning that. I might deem my pens in my pencil case taonga to me. The information in which I acquired those pens and where they came from, what they're made of, their significance is only known by me. And for anyone to go, that's not a taonga, what are you talking about? I was like, how do you know?
Yeah, it's the context, eh?
That's exactly it. So there's a lot to what someone can believe a taonga is. But I think in the context of this podcast, it's a word we will absolutely be stretching it every which way. We're also, I welcome, people to challenge these perspectives as well. I there's only so much you can really say in one episode, right? So there'll be a lot of things that we're probably not saying, but maybe referring to or leaning into. However, it's to equip listeners, I guess, with the courage and understanding to use the word taonga. And it's not just a word that only Māori people can use or understand, but I guess humans have taonga all around them. Every human has taonga, and I guess every human is a taonga as well. So yeah, interesting what the reo can do in this context. And what else about taonga? Anything else about taonga?
I think the all-encompassing power of taonga, I think is important, and it's always going to develop and grow and change, depending on your circumstances, your context and your worldview. We can't just put it in a box, excuse the pun, and that it's more than that. And even though we are, for the most part in this podcast series, talking about physical objects, it's important, I think, for our listeners to understand that, this is just one example of what a taonga is. And even the stories that we tell in many ways are a taonga. Add to the history, add to the understanding, of what we're trying to do here.
And I just thought of, not to be a spoiler, but in upcoming episodes we'll be talking about a range of taonga that perhaps you as a listener may not have thought as of being taonga, and because they're not in the usual form of what we think taonga are. So, books with really important, rich information pertaining to Māori people and whakapapa are absolutely taonga. Paintings done by a Pākehā artist are taonga. Pākehā photographers, of course, taonga. Again, just hoping that this podcast can extend on that understanding, but also invite you to have a really good think about what does that mean for you and what do taonga mean to you.
This discussion, this kōrero about just one word, taonga, I think is an example of taonga, and also how important languages are to people's worldviews. That one word represents so much, and also in Te Reo Māori, I'm just learning it myself, and so I don't have an in-depth understanding of it, but it's really clear as you're learning that you're also learning a worldview. So much can be in just one word. I think it's good and important to clarify what you mean by that word, even if you do have an understanding of what it is, and because it can mean so many things.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to our not so brief. It was good. It was a good kōrero, and something that I think is important for us to kind of put out there and lay that kind of groundwork right from the start so that people know where we're coming from and what we mean. So ngā mihi nui for joining us. Next time, we'll open our first file and we'll step into the stories that have shaped us. Until then,
keep listening.
Keep connecting.
And remember,
Every taonga has a story.